Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. This is as you probably know, this is the session about the 2024 annual report focused on changes. So this is intended for folks who have already done the report before, but just need to know what's different from last year. As a reminder, we will be recording it. So anything that, if you're on camera or if anything you say will end up on the recording. But also, if something comes up, somebody's at the desk, etc., you can always come back and just watch the recording. But thank you so much to everybody for joining today. I've muted everyone. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions or raise your hand and ask questions. We'll also just have little spots for asking questions as well. This is not a huge group, so this can be fairly informal. But thanks to everybody for all the work that you all do to make the report happen. I know it's a lot. In addition to, running a library, say. So we really appreciate it. Yeah, okay. So let's just jump in. 2024 Public Libraries Annual Report. Okay, first off, this is sort of a thing that I restructured from previous years, and I just want to say it, even though this is not news to you all. The most important three rules about the report are: one, whenever you get stuck or you have a question, ask me about it. Don't feel like you have to figure it out on your own or you should, spend X amount of time on it. Just ask me a question. Just email me or call me or whatever. Don't ever feel like you should know it, because you shouldn't. Okay, so that's one. Number two is, so this is the thing we're changing this year. We were using NA if you didn't have an answer, and now we're using M for missing. The hope is might be a little bit clearer, but my point here is if you don't have an answer, put missing. Don't feel bad about it. Just put M for missing. Don't feel like you need to guesstimate a number. In general, we would much rather have no number than a number that was just sort of invented out of the air. So don't ever hesitate to put M in. And then this one was more for the new folks, but it is that you've done this before. We will get through it. It can be a pain in spots. And sometimes data isn't available, things don't happen, but it will all work out. And in X amount of time, we will all be able to look back at it and maybe not laugh, but it will be done and we won't have to worry about it again. So that being said, I really appreciate all of your hard work on this. So, um, okay, what is the annual report? You all know. Statistical overview of a library, a year in the life of a library, gets done on a federal level. There are questions that IMLS puts in that we get some feedback on, and then there are questions that we add to the report. Who uses the info of the report? Basically everyone, from the national, state, and local level, all the way from IMLS and the feds, federal government, to individual libraries throughout the country. And all right. Okay, when is the report due? Okay, so report is due every year, but the tentative submission window, and we might get nudged on this. My hope was we were starting on November 1. We just had to we had some changes, a fair amount of changes, and that took a little bit longer with the vendor. We may not be starting on exactly on November 1. I'll let people know as soon as that gets going, because our rep there has to make everything happen. If we get pushed back, it'll just push all the days back. But our intention is November 1 through December 31, with an optional extension that goes to January 20th, 2025. To get the optional extension, you just ask me and you get it. You don't have to prove anything. I don't care. It's just a way to keep the ball rolling on this process. So those are the dates. Again, if we get a late start, we're just going to move everything back a little bit. Okay, this one again may be obvious to people, but what time period does the report cover? People can have different fiscal years. The rule number one is whatever you did last year, just do a year after it. That is almost always going to get you in the right spot unless you change a fiscal year or something like that. It goes into details on what you do besides that. But then the real important piece is if you're ever wondering about what your year should be, ask me before you do any work at all, because there's nothing sadder than getting most of the way through the report and realizing that you just duplicated last year's work. So, okay, that's that. Okay, these are the important parts. What did we change for this year? So a thing I'm going to come back to is really maybe the biggest change is the portal looks different. Our vendor, Baker and Taylor, updated the interface. So it looks similar to what it looked like before, but it's just a more modern interface. And it also has a few quality of life things built in that we've been sort of asking for a while. So it'll function pretty similarly to the way it has before. I'll show you what it looks like in a minute, but that's going to be the first difference that you're going to see. And then we tweaked some questions this time around. Not that we didn't last time around too, but some of these are federal changes, and some of these are ones that we're tried to make easier. Those are basically the two kinds that happen at this point. First off, M for missing. If you don't know, if a number's not available, you used to put NA, and now it's M for missing. Hopefully that's just a squinch clearer than NA, which sounds like not applicable and might mean something totally different. So to clarify, if you don't have a number, the number's not available, it's a thing you did, but you don't know it, M is what you want. If it's a thing you didn't do at all, you didn't have, or it's a category that doesn't exist for you, 0 is what you want there. That's and I can always kind of, if you're ever fuzzy on which of those you should be using, just email me and we'll get it resolved. Okay, staffing. The staffing questions, we rewrote them to be a little bit clearer, hopefully, that we're looking for the number of hours worked by a category of staff member, not the number of staff. Those questions were confusing because IMLS wants FTE, full-time equivalent staff, and we asked for hours because hours makes a lot more sense in Vermont because there's a lot of libraries who don't have any 1 FTEs. So hopefully we rewrote it so it makes more sense. But in general, we're looking for a number of hours that your librarians worked or a number of weekly hours that your other staff worked. Yeah. I'll hold for questions right at the end of this slide because this is the first one that sort of like has a lot of stuff in it. Grants. We re-added back 2 specific questions, a specific question that asks about the summer programming grants and another one that asks specifically about the courier grants. They also list the amount that you would have gotten and by year. So hopefully those will be easy to fill out. We put those back in because they were ending up under the wrong categories in some cases, whether it's not totally clear whether they're federal or state. So now they're in there and you'll just have to put the number in. Expenditures. This was a federal change. They sort of clarified the differences in collections expenses, the differences between physical, electronic, and other, because confusingly, electronic really means online, and other includes things like CDs, DVDs, playaways, etc. That was a little less clear, and now it's a little more clear, but the naming is still the way it is. So that's the tweak for that. For holdings, 2 semi-major changes. For number of downloadable items, now we just want you to tell us the number that you purchased specifically for your library. So we don't need the consortium numbers. We will add in the consortium numbers, so you just don't have to deal with that. You only need, if you're doing Overdrive Advantage, where you buy stuff just for your patrons, if you're doing Palace Marketplace, where you buy stuff just for your patrons, you will put that number in, and you don't need to know about what the consortium is doing. We're hopeful that'll be a little bit clearer. And then secondly, physical serials and magazines. We had a question about how many you offered. We have dropped that question because so many of them are online now, and there's not a great way to track online titles where it's really meaningful. So we've just dropped the question entirely. And then last for this slide is downloadables and databases. The IMLS has added a series of yes/no questions about basically where do you get ebooks? Do you get them from you buy them yourself, you get them from a consortium, or you get them from the state? And each of those are yes/nos, so you can check any or all. And it asks ebooks, e-audiobooks, e-serials, e-video, but these are yes/no questions. You don't need to tell them any stats. You just say, this is where we get it. And this is a new one, so I'm always happy to help when we get time to fill that out. Any questions on what you've seen so far in this slide or any of the stuff preceding? And if you have a question, you can either unmute yourself and ask it, you can raise your hand, or you can put it in the chat. And we'll have plenty of more spots for questions, but I just want to offer up one right now. Yeah, Bree, you can unmute yourself if that works for you.
Okay, so just quickly on that downloadables and databases. So if you have Overdrive Advantage, then you get some of them from your library, but you belong to Green Mountain Library Consortium, so you get some from the consortium, and then you also get PALAS from the state of Vermont. You would answer yes to all of those questions. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. Yes. Yeah, and
Okay.
and there's probably a fair amount of people who will be in that boat, frankly.
Okay. And I'm following you. That's great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for asking that. Yes. Yeah, this is a new question where the IMLS has kind of transformed how they were tracking this, and this is their new idea. So we'll see how it goes. Any other questions on this slide or stuff we've talked about so far? Okay, we're going to hop to the next slide. Feel free to chime in at any point, though. Okay, this is the updated questions continued. Okay, number of borrowers. This is a question that we've had for long term. It was basically there was adult and children, and that's how we've asked it, or then a total if you can't do adult or children. We added a YA or teen category for libraries that have one. We're not telling you you need one. It's just if you have one, you can just put it in there, and that way you don't have to do weird math where you're like, which category should I count them under? But I know that some folks have added that recently, and some folks may have already had one. So if you do have one, there's just a spot for it. Okay, e-circulation. This one, it has simultaneously been made more complicated and simpler, so I don't know. It might even out in the middle. What we had been doing is we've been asking about ebooks and e-audiobooks, and we would break them down by 3 age categories each. So now IMLS has changed that, and now we want to do circulations for ebooks, circulations for e-serials, i.e. magazines, e-audio, and e-video, but it's not getting broken down by age. We know some of those might be hard to get. Those are things that historically have been a little bit challenging for people. And again, this is the first year, so we are all just going to kind of do our best. But you won't need to break them down by age. You may find that knowing them by age is really handy internally. So obviously, like anything, you can track more than we're asking, but we will only need a single number for each of those. And then there's also an option for a total. If you can't break it down by category, if you just have a total, you can put the total in there as well. Auto renewals. This one is new as well. If your ILS or catalog automatically renews items when they are due, some ILSs have the option to do that, and some people turn it on. You just say, yes, we're doing that. This is because what they've discovered is it seems like libraries who have automatic renewals have their circ numbers get elevated significantly, and so it's a little bit of an apples and oranges if you don't have auto renewals versus if you do. So you just need to say yes for that. Okay, next. This is one that I'm hopeful will simplify this process a little bit for folks going forward. Maybe not this year because you've probably been tracking it the old way. Programming. We sort of simplified the way we were doing it while still maintaining the federal approach. In that we got from 32 questions down to 6 questions. So for programming, the first part, you will ask the number of programs and the number of attendants by age. There are for the 5 age categories, young kids, older kids, Y18, adult, and then general interest. So you do that, boom. And then sort of separately, you're asked for program attendance and program and attendance totals for offsite, for virtual. So before we had basically there was on-site, all 5 categories, off-site, all 5 categories, virtual, all 5 categories. So we shrunk it a little bit. So we will, yeah. So there's the 5 age categories, boom, 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 and then there are 2 locations. And we only ask 2 locations because we're going to just subtract, and the assumption is that the remainder, and in most cases the majority, are on-site. So that one will probably make more sense when you're looking at it, frankly. But it's hopefully will just be a little bit easier to deal with. I will say that on my side, probably more than probably close to 40% of my time resolving um, questions with the report involved the programming questions because there were so many and they were so complicated. And now, hopefully, this will be just a squinch easier than last year. Okay, so that's programming. Outreach. We have a new outreach question, which is number of outreach events. Outreach events are things like tabling, um, being at a farmer's market, being at other large events that you were just like one table in, or something going to the fair, anything like that. It's a pilot question, so we know you might not have, in fact, there's no reason you would have that number unless you're already tracking it. But so we just put that you don't have it if that's, but that's the thing that we're going forward trying to capture because in many cases those things are not a program in the traditional sense. You're not, it's not sort of it's a really short interaction with people. So, and we can talk about which is what going forward. And then last but not least, website visits was a question they added about during COVID, and they have removed it. So you don't need to keep track website visits anymore, which is probably good because it was a very difficult one to track depending on your software. So that was a lot. Questions from this slide? And we'll have more opportunity, obviously, in a smidge. If Bree, yes, please.
See, I'm paying attention on a Friday afternoon. I do have a question about the programming. So you're asking about, and I think we've had this before, but the intended audience, for the program, but we don't collect the attendees' age.
Thank
when they
you.
sign in, or we get numbers for a program. If it's, a family program,
Yes.
we're not making everyone write their age down. So you're not asking about program attendance by age, you're asking about like intended audience. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm sorry that I led us down a path where that didn't sound right. That is 100% correct. So just to clarify, every program, like you said, every program has an intended age or sort of the most primary age. If you're ever in doubt, it's sort of who do you think of the core demographic that is going to attend this program? And that program is that age. So, and then when you count attendance is under whatever age that program is focused on, like you said, the intended age. You never ever have to figure out how old anybody is the short version. You're always looking at what kind of a program they're in. Oh, this is one of our 0 to 5 programs. Everybody at the 0 to 5 program gets lumped into that category. Oh, this is one of our 12 to 18 programs. Everybody in the 12 to 18 goes in there. And then general interest is programs that are intentionally intergenerational or that really do appeal to everyone. But yes, so to answer that question, you're 100% correct. You never have to figure out how old anyone is. And I totally left that out of this description.
Okay, good. I'm glad. that would be awkward.
That would be awkward. But I know that people, yeah, I think they're so yeah, that's the basic one is you never need to know how old anyone is. You just need to know what kind of a program they're in. Thank you, Bree. Thanks so much for clarifying that because I was probably just going to skate by it. Josh, you were up. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Hey, it's Josh. Hi, Josh.
Hey there. Good afternoon.
I was just curious about eVideo.
Yes.
Whether that includes things like Canopy, etc.
Yes. Okay. So it does. There are so this section, the e-circulation section, the only thing that the sort of the clarifying thing, such as it is that things need to have a checkout period. So if there's anything, including Canopy, Hoopla, I assume Biblio Plus, though I haven't worked with it, any other sort of video software, if they get it for a certain amount of time, that counts by their definition, that counts as a circulation if you can get that number. So yeah, if it's available, those definitely go in under that. That's a number. E-video and e-serials are something that we were not as we were tracking, kind of we were lumping in before. So that's but that's going to be a work in progress. I think my understanding is that Canopy just changed their counting system and to make it weirder. And so I think that's something that we might because they count credits maybe and not an actual circ. Anyway, but yes, so that's a yes basically.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And Bree.
Okay, back to the e-videos then.
Yes.
So we have Biblio Plus, and you don't check them out for a certain time period. It's just you're able to capture the views through your administrative portal. So you can see, how many people visited your Biblio Plus, and then how many views your patrons, in a sense, checked out, but there's not a checkout period. So
that is a great,
because it's unlimited access, you don't check anything out. So watching a show is one view, watching the next episode is another view, and so on and so on. They are easy to capture once you know how to use the dashboard, but it doesn't get checked out for a time period. Okay.
Well, so I'm going to have to get back to you on that. That's great information, and I appreciate it because I haven't worked with Biblio Plus at all. I'll clarify. I'll see if other states can help me clarify that. My default thought is that using the logic that they have presented is that might end up being what they refer to as that might end up going in database usage, because that's sort of historically been their difference is if it has a circ period, it's a circ, and if it doesn't have a circ period, it's that. But I'm going to get clarification on that before you feel like you have to put anything in anywhere.
Good, because more people have Biblio Plus now.
Yes.
So that would be great.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. I'll figure that out because that would be good. And especially, like you said, as it's becoming more popular here in VT, we would like to figure out the best way to capture it. Awesome. Okay. Let me check mark that so I know I have to do it. All right. Any other questions on what we have so far? Okay. So I think I just want to make sure. Okay, this is going to be a reminder. This was true last year as well. So sort of to save space, in many cases, you'll see the name of the question, but then the sort of long definition is going to be hidden behind the little question mark icon next to the question. I would recommend, until you feel like you absolutely know it all, I would recommend getting the habit of pushing the pushing the question mark icon and getting the definition. In some cases, it may impact how you answer it. It's not as though we just changed any of the questions, except for what we already told you, but it does give some context. So especially if you're having some uncertainty about whether what you have counts as A or B, just clicking that is a great place to start. Okay. Sample periods. This is just a quick shout out for sample periods versus estimates. So gradually, so there are things that you can count, that you have an actual count for the year, and those are great. Then there are the ones that are harder to track for the year. There are a couple ways to do that. I think historically we've had estimates where people would say, I bet I have about 1,500 of these during a year. We're trying to move away from estimates that are sort of based on, I think. So our suggestion is to move to sample periods. And this is long term. You can't really retroactively do this, but sample periods are the way they work is you find a couple of probably 1 or 2 week periods that are medium. They're not super busy. They're not super quiet. They're medium. And then just count that question during that period. For example, you pick 2 weeks during May and you pick 2 weeks during October and you count reference questions then. If that's a thing that you have trouble capturing for the whole year. or you do computer usage. If it's anyway, these are for things that you can't get really a great year-long number. You just pick 2 weeks and you're like, we're really going to focus on it for 2 weeks. And then you just multiply to find a yearly number. That is not a perfect number, but it's a grounded estimate. And our goal is to get 2 grounded estimates. That's a long-term goal. So, and then lastly, of course, if you don't have a number, put an M. Don't feel like you need to like reverse engineer a number or something like that. Just go with M. Okay. Let's see. These are all things that are pretty straightforward and that I think you're going to know. I'm just trying to remember if any of this. Okay. You know what? I'm just going to show you the new portal now because I think that's going to give you the most information. So to get to the new portal, it's the same. I'll send this all out. You're all going to get the intro email that has your passwords and the link and general information, but it's all the same thing as last year. Your logins are the same and the URL is the same. So let's share. Okay. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger if it will let me. Boop. Okay. So here we go. All right. So this is with the interface. This is the login. Like I said, it looks just a little bit different. I'm going to log in as a library that I think is not here. So hopefully that will work and it won't throw anybody off. Oh, I just lost my login. Okay. So you're going to log in. It's going to show you all of your previous surveys. This library hasn't is a test one, so they haven't completed that many. But it's going to show you all your previous ones, and then it's going to show the current one here, 2024. So we just want to hit continue. And then your interface. Okay, sorry. This window is going to pop up. For this window, you want to put your name, a phone number, and an email in. The reason this window is here is to help prevent multiple people being in a given report at the same time. So first off, in theory, you can't have 2 people in anymore. You can't have 2 different people. You also can't have 2 tabs going of the report. This is because it's really easy to overwrite what one person is doing with the other person's work. And that even includes like if I'm in it, if you're in it and I'm in it at the same time, it's very easy to lose fields. So it won't let you do this. And so now when you do this, you put this in, and then if somebody else or me tries to use it, it'll say you can't use it because in this case, Josh is in the report. So get in touch with Josh or whoever. And it's just a way to make it easier and prevent issues with that. You'll fill it out. I'm pretty sure you only fill it out initially. So, or I think you confirm it once it's already in. Okay, so there we are. This is what the report looks like. Again, it looks a lot like the old version of the report, but the interface is just a little bit better. It works better on different size screens. I don't think I would fill this out on a phone, but I think you can fill it out on a phone now or tablet, something like that. They've nudged things around a little bit. Another one of the important things that they added this time around is that before, when you moved pages or you clicked save, it would save everything. Now, every time you click away from a field, it saves the field. So you don't necessarily need to keep clicking the save button all the time. And I think that'll hopefully make it even less likely that anybody will lose data while they're entering stuff. So that's the difference. Let's see. Otherwise, this is what a given question looks like. So it'll have the name of it. It'll have what's in there, either empty or you've entered something in. You have the little question mark icon here. It will show you, by default, it shows you last year's answer. I think that's almost always good to have going. If for some reason it ever disappears, you can re-enable last year's answers all the way up, where it says hide last year's answers, show last year's answers. And then underneath it, there are these things that were, some of which were there before, and some of which weren't. So flag. You flag a question. Here, I'll just... Flagging a question is for you, your own use. It's, I have a question about this. I want to get back to it. Basically, that's what flags are for. They're not to tell me about something. They're not to tell the end result. They're just like, I have a question. I need to get back to this. So that's what flag is. Note is a way to, is edit checks. And edit checks, as a reminder, are a thing that happened when you enter data and the system says that data looks weird compared to last year's data. It either looks really high or it looks really low, or it's something else is weird about it. So in order to get through the process and fully submit on that, it will ask for a note that you'll have to submit to explain why the number looks weird to the system. And in general, people often just do edit checks at the very end, but you can do it as you go along, particularly if you find a field that you're like, I know this field is going to be weird. We didn't do X because we didn't have this staff member for half a year, or we did way more because we had a new staff member. So you can do it as you go along, or you can do it at the end. And I'll show you what the edit check page looks like at the very end, just a smidge later. But you can make this appear or disappear. History, and we're not seeing much here. History shows you the last 5 years of responses. So if you have a question about what you've submitted before, you're like, this year's number looks weird. What did last year? Okay, now I need to see what happens a few years before. You can just turn it on or off, but it will give you that data. Again, Concord doesn't have data in here, so that's why it doesn't look like there's anything to show. But let's see, questions that, in general, those are the big differences for this, for the new portal. Is it's just got a little bit more options kind of tacked right in there. You can check your edit check notes. You can see history from previous years. Otherwise, it looks a lot like last year. I'm seeing it does, because the new site is a lot chunkier than the old one. There are moments where there's like a momentary pause. So I think and probably that'll pick up as time goes along, but you should be prepared for those occasionally. But it hasn't really done anything weird to me yet. Let's see, edit checks. Let's talk about edit checks just for a moment again. So I showed you what they were a little bit. The other way you might get them is you submit you put everything in, the survey is complete. Hold on, wait, I'm just checking to make sure I don't have any questions popped up. Survey is complete, and everything's ready to go. So that's when you click status. This is historically the last step, but you can do it anytime. It will show you these 3 tabs at the top. Edit checks. Edit checks are what I just talked about. Unanswered questions. These are questions that are mandatory that you did not answer. So something needs to be in them. And then flag questions. Flag questions are, again, those little flags that you just put for yourself. So that's just a way to mark it for your internal use, but it won't let you submit if you still have any flags, basically. Okay, so edit checks. Here, I'm just going to pick one. Okay, for example, it says the staff expenditures are 0, and it doesn't think that staff expenditures should be 0. So in that case, you're like, okay, what is the explanation for that? You go and you put it. It should generally tell you. Most of the time you need a federal note because it has to do with an IMLS question, but occasionally it asks for a state question. But yes, so this is where the edit check explanations go. But whenever you get to this point, you can always feel free to say, Josh, can you figure out what is going on with the edit checks, especially if they don't make sense. But even just like initially, I feel stuck. I deal with them a lot more than you all have to, so I'm happy to answer them, and I can try to figure out what they're looking for. Okay, so that was status. Let's see. I'm going to click return to my survey. Those are the primary things that you're going to be, and then once status is all set, then you click submit. It will tell you, yes, you did. Check, check, check. Everything's done. Click submit. And there you go. Okay, so that is basically the interface. Does anybody have questions about the interface or the stuff that we just looked at? obviously, it will make a lot more sense once you're in it, and you may discover things that I didn't that didn't crop up. But I'm hopeful. Like I said, it mostly is in the kind of same shape as last year's form. It just works somewhat better. Okay, I'm going to close the interface. Stop sharing. Okay, so one other thing I will add is, I'll just, oh, hold on, let me open it up. It is that we have a page about the filling out the annual report. We have a page on the website. So let me just go there for one moment, just to remind you that it exists. And okay. So boop. This is on our website. It gives you basically all the details about the survey, pretty much everything I've just said, more or less. So if you need to go find something, this is a good place to look. There's information about what numbers you should be tracking. There is frequently asked questions. There is, if you need a paper version or a Word version of all the questions, it's available right here. And tips on how to get online numbers, etc. I'm going to put it in the chat just for good measure. And there's that. Okay, and then one last thing I've thought of is I recommend, this is maybe what you're already doing. When you're filling out the survey, I recommend making sure that you have the numbers you're using written down or digital somewhere else. Don't put the only copy in the survey, because if something goes awry, then you don't have that number anymore, and you have to ask the town treasurer for it again or something. Whatever your workflow is fine. I just recommend making sure that a number exists somewhere besides this survey in case something bad or catastrophic occurs. Okay, hold on. I'm just making sure that I don't have another dramatically important piece of information. Yeah, I think that I've fielded all the things I've intended to do. So please, if you have any questions, raise your hand or unmute yourself. Bree just said, will the slide deck be available outside of the recording? Yes, it's actually already available in one spot. It may not be it was intended to be in two spots. I will make sure it is on the page that I just showed you. I think right now it's under our webinars, but it's not in the annual report section. So put on website. Additionally, yes. Any other questions or things you'd like me to elaborate on? Again, the most important takeaway is that if you have a question or hit any weirdness, anything at all, if you hit a problem, you should talk to me. Because probably I've seen it before, and it's not worth you spending X amount of time that you don't really have on trying to puzzle it out. Just in some cases, send me an email and then you can stop working on it and work on another thing if that works with your workflow. All right. Well, if there are any questions, I think I think that we're all set. Again, we'll make sure that the recording of this one and the other one are both available online, and the slideshow as well. And we will figure out the answer on Biblio Plus and see if we have like a clear, this is what we should be doing on those. And otherwise, so you expect an email soon, and I'm hopeful we'll start for November 1. It's possible it will be a few days after that. And thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Bye all. Have a great weekend. It's Friday. Take care.